London, 1855. The carriage wheels rattled over cobblestones as rain pelted the windows, matching the storm of emotions in Clara Fairchild's heart. She clutched the crumpled letter in her gloved hands, the words blurring before her eyes, not from tears, she assured herself, but from the jostling of the journey. "Miss Fairchild," her companion, Mrs. Willoughby, said softly. "We shall arrive at Lord Sutherland's estate within the hour. Perhaps you might wish to compose yourself." Clara straightened her posture, tucking the letter into her reticule. "I am perfectly composed, Mrs. Willoughby. This arrangement is merely a business transaction, after all." The older woman's eyes softened with pity, a look Clara had grown to despise these past months. "Marriage is hardly a business transaction, my dear. When one's father gambles away a family fortune and dies leaving nothing but debts, it becomes precisely that." Clara turned to the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. "Lord Sutherland requires a wife of good breeding to restore respectability to his name, and I require financial security. The arrangement benefits us both." What Clara did not say was how the very thought of marrying a stranger, this mysterious Lord Sutherland, a man she'd never met, whose reputation was whispered about in scandalized tones throughout London society, filled her with dread. Yet what choice did she have? At 23, with no fortune and her family's disgrace hanging over her head, this marriage contract was her only salvation from destitution. "A woman should marry for love," Mrs. Willoughby insisted. Clara's laugh held no humor. "Love is a luxury afforded to those with fortune and status. I have neither." She smoothed her grey travelling dress, the finest she still owned, and adjusted her bonnet. "Besides, I've heard enough about Lord Sutherland to know that love is not what he seeks in this arrangement either." The rumours had reached even her ears, secluded as she'd been since her father's death. Lord Sutherland, returned from abroad after a decade's mysterious absence, shrouded in scandal, his face rarely seen in society. Some whispered of disfigurement, others of criminal deeds in foreign lands. All agreed on one thing: he was desperately seeking to restore his family name through an advantageous marriage. And Clara, despite her father's disgrace, still possessed the one thing money couldn't buy: impeccable bloodlines tracing back to William the Conqueror. "We all have our burdens to bear, Mrs. Willoughby," Clara said. "I shall be a dutiful wife. That is all that can be expected of me." What Clara didn't reveal was the ironclad resolve beneath her composed exterior. She would never allow herself to be vulnerable again, not after watching her mother waste away from heartbreak over her father's betrayals. Not after seeing how quickly society turned its back on a family once celebrated in its ballrooms. Love was a weakness she could ill afford. As the carriage crested a hill, Thornfield Hall came into view, a grand Gothic structure of grey stone and soaring turrets, imposing against the stormy sky. Clara felt a flutter of apprehension in her stomach but quickly suppressed it. This would be her prison and her salvation. "Remember, my dear," Mrs. Willoughby said as the carriage approached the imposing gates, "you need only say the word and we shall return to London. My modest home remains open to you." Clara squeezed the older woman's hand in gratitude, but they both knew the offer was empty. Mrs. Willoughby's modest home could scarcely feed another mouth, and Clara refused to be a burden. "My decision is made," she said firmly. The carriage rolled to a stop before the grand entrance. A butler appeared, opening the door and extending an umbrella. "Miss Fairchild, Mrs. Willoughby," he intoned solemnly. "I am Phillips, head butler of Thornfield Hall. Lord Sutherland awaits you in the library." Clara stepped into the cavernous entrance hall, her footsteps echoing against marble floors. Ancestral portraits lined the walls, stern faces of the Sutherland lineage gazing down upon her with judgment. Phillips led them through a maze of corridors, finally stopping before a heavy oak door. "His lordship requested to meet Miss Fairchild alone," Phillips announced. Mrs. Willoughby began to protest, but Clara silenced her with a glance. "I shall be fine. Please wait for me in whatever accommodations have been prepared." After her companion reluctantly departed, Phillips knocked once on the door. A deep voice from within commanded, "Enter." Clara steeled herself, lifting her chin as the butler opened the door and announced her. She stepped into a vast library, walls lined with books from floor to ceiling. A fire roared in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the room. At first, she thought the room empty, then a figure moved from the shadows by the window. Lord Sutherland stood with his back to her, tall and imposing in a well-tailored black coat. His dark hair was longer than was fashionable, curling slightly at his collar. "Miss Fairchild," he said without turning, "you've had a long journey. I trust it was not too unpleasant." "The journey was satisfactory, my lord," she replied evenly. "Satisfactory," he repeated, a hint of amusement in his voice. "How terribly pragmatic of you." He turned then, and Clara found herself face to face with Lord Sutherland for the first time. The rumours of disfigurement had been grossly exaggerated. His face was striking rather than handsome, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw currently darkened by evening stubble. His eyes were the colour of a stormy sea, and they studied her with unsettling intensity. A thin scar ran from his right temple down his cheek, disappearing into his collar, the only visible mark that spoke of a violent past. "You are disappointed," he stated. Clara blinked. "I beg your pardon. You expected a monster, did you not? Some hideously disfigured creature to match the gossip." "I try not to form expectations based on rumours, my lord," she answered carefully. He laughed, a sound without warmth. "How diplomatic. Yet I see the assessment in your eyes, Miss Fairchild. You are determining whether you can bear to be married to me without feeling revulsion." His bluntness startled her. Clara found her composure and met his gaze directly. "And you, my lord, are determining whether I am pretty enough to serve as an ornament at your table, yet docile enough not to interfere with whatever mysterious affairs occupy your time." For a moment, surprise registered on his face, before his expression returned to careful neutrality. "They told me you were meek. They were mistaken." A hint of a genuine smile touched his lips before disappearing. "Indeed." He gestured to a chair near the fire. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." Clara sat, arranging her skirts with practiced grace. Lord Sutherland remained standing, his tall figure casting a long shadow across the carpet. "I assume you've been informed of the terms of our arrangement," he said. "Yes. You require a wife of suitable lineage to restore your family's standing. In exchange, my family's debts will be settled, and I will be provided for." A crude but accurate summary. He paced before the fireplace. "What they likely did not tell you is why my reputation needs restoring." Clara's curiosity piqued despite herself. "They said only that you've been abroad for many years." 10 years, to be precise. I left England under difficult circumstances." His voice hardened. "My father was murdered, Miss Fairchild. I was accused of the crime." Clara couldn't suppress her gasp. "But surely you were exonerated." "In the eyes of the law, yes. In the eyes of society," he shrugged. "Hence our current arrangement." "And did you?" Clara began, then stopped herself. "Did I murder my father?" Lord Sutherland's eyes glittered dangerously in the firelight. "What do you believe, Miss Fairchild?" Clara looked at him, this stranger she was to marry, and found she could not read him at all. "I believe," she said carefully, "that I know nothing of you or your circumstances, my lord." A prudent answer. He turned to stare into the flames. "I should inform you that our marriage will be one of convenience only. I have no interest in a romantic attachment." "On that we are in agreement," Clara replied, relief washing through her. "I require only respect and the security you've promised." "Then we understand each other." He glanced at her over his shoulder. "The wedding will take place in 3 days' time. A small, private affair. I've taken the liberty of having suitable attire prepared for you." "So soon?" "I see no benefit in delay. Do you object?" Clara shook her head. The sooner this transaction was complete, the sooner she could begin this new chapter of her life, loveless but secure. "Very well." He rang a bell, and Phillips appeared instantly. "Show Miss Fairchild to her chambers. She must be fatigued from her journey." As Clara rose to leave, Lord Sutherland spoke again. "One more thing, Miss Fairchild. There are parts of the East Wing that remain closed. You are not to enter them under any circumstances. Is that understood?" Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the draught in the vast room. "Perfectly, my lord." His eyes held hers for a long moment. "Good night, then." "Good night, Lord Sutherland." As Phillips led her from the library, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made a pact with someone far more dangerous than she had anticipated. Yet what choice did she have? Her fate was sealed. She would marry this mysterious stranger and pray that the price of security would not be too dear. The wedding was precisely as promised, small, private, and entirely without joy. Clara spoke her vows in a calm, clear voice, while Lord Sutherland, Maxwell, she reminded herself, though the name felt foreign on her tongue, responded with detached efficiency. The ring he placed upon her finger was heavy gold, set with the Sutherland family crest, a falcon with outstretched wings. The wedding breakfast that followed was a sombre affair, attended only by the local vicar, Mrs. Willoughby, and Lord Sutherland's solicitor, a nervous man who kept casting anxious glances at his client. By afternoon, Mrs. Willoughby had departed for London with tears in her eyes and a promise from Clara to write often. The household staff moved about their duties with quiet efficiency, carefully averting their eyes from the new mistress of Thornfield Hall. Clara stood at the window of her chambers, not the guest quarters she'd occupied before the wedding, but the Countess's suite, connected to Lord Sutherland's rooms by a discreetly locked door. Rain lashed against the glass as twilight descended, casting the gardens in melancholy shadow. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. "Enter," she called. A young maid appeared, curtsying deeply. "Begging your pardon, my lady, but his lordship requests your presence in the library." "Thank you," Clara paused, realizing she didn't know the girl's name. "Millie, my lady." "Thank you, Millie. Please inform Lord Sutherland. I shall join him presently." Clara changed from her wedding gown into a simpler evening dress of deep blue silk, one of several new garments that had mysteriously appeared in her wardrobe. She arranged her hair in a simple chignon and descended to the library, uncertain what this summons might portend. She found Maxwell seated at his desk, papers spread before him. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Lady Sutherland," he acknowledged. The title sounded strange to her ears. "My lord," she responded with a small curtsy. "Please sit." He gestured to a chair opposite his desk. As she settled into it, he pushed a leather portfolio toward her. "These documents require your signature." Clara opened the portfolio to find a series of legal papers. She read carefully, her brow furrowing. "These grant me an annual allowance and ownership of a cottage in Devon. Yes, should anything happen to me, you will not be left destitute." She looked up sharply. "Are you expecting something to happen to you, my lord?" A shadow crossed his face. "I have enemies, Clara. It is prudent to be prepared." It was the first time he had used her given name, and it sounded oddly intimate in his deep voice. She pushed the thought aside and continued reading the documents. "This final paper," she said, reaching the last page, "stipulates that I am to ask no questions about your business affairs or private matters. Is that unreasonable?" Clara met his gaze directly. "It is unusual." Maxwell leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Our entire arrangement is unusual. I require privacy in certain matters. In return, you have financial security and the freedom to pursue whatever interests you desire." "Except those that involve understanding my husband," she replied, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from her voice. His expression hardened. "You agreed to a marriage of convenience. Do not pretend you expected more." Clara's cheeks burned with embarrassment. He was right, of course. She had entered this arrangement with her eyes open. She picked up the pen and signed each document in her neat, flowing hand. "Thank you," Maxwell said, his voice softening slightly as he gathered the papers. "I hope you will be comfortable here. The staff has been instructed to meet your every need, and you are free to redecorate as you wish." "That is generous, my lord." "Maxwell," he corrected, "at least in private. We are husband and wife, after all." "In name only," she reminded him. Something flickered in his eyes, amusement, perhaps, or appreciation of her directness. "Indeed." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Clara rose, preparing to retire for the evening, when he spoke again. "I shall be leaving tomorrow on business. I expect to be gone for several weeks." "So soon after our wedding?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "The timing is unfortunate, but the matter cannot be delayed." He hesitated. "While I am away, I must insist again that you respect the boundaries I have set regarding the East Wing." Clara's curiosity stirred despite her best efforts to remain indifferent. "May I ask why that area is forbidden?" "You may ask," he replied, a hint of amusement in his tone, "but as per the agreement you just signed, I am not obliged to answer." She inclined her head in acknowledgement of his point. "Good night then, Maxwell." "Good night, Clara." As she turned to leave, she caught his reflection in the window. His expression had softened, his eyes following her with what appeared to be regret. But when she glanced back, his face was impassive once more, and she convinced herself she had imagined it. The weeks following Maxwell's departure passed in a blur of routine. Clara explored the vast house, except, of course, the forbidden East Wing, and familiarized herself with the duties of managing such an extensive household. The servants, initially reserved, gradually warmed to her as she learned their names and showed interest in their lives. She wrote letters to Mrs. Willoughby, careful to present her new life in the most positive light. She catalogued the extensive library, discovering first editions and rare volumes that spoke of the Sutherland family's long history of scholarship. She walked the grounds when weather permitted, finding solace in the wild beauty of the moors surrounding Thornfield Hall. Yet for all her attempts to occupy herself, Clara could not escape the growing curiosity about her absent husband. His presence lingered throughout the house, in the books annotated in his bold handwriting, in the music room where a half-finished composition lay abandoned on the pianoforte, in the portrait gallery where his image was conspicuously absent among his ancestors. One rainy afternoon, while searching for a particular volume on botany, Clara discovered a door hidden behind a tapestry in the library. Her heart quickened. Could this be an entrance to the mysterious East Wing? She hesitated, remembering her promise, but the temptation proved too great. The door opened silently onto a narrow corridor. Clara grabbed a candle and proceeded cautiously, her conscience battling with her curiosity. The passage led to another door, this one unlocked. She pushed it open to reveal a room that took her breath away. Unlike the somber, masculine decor of the rest of the house, this chamber was a riot of color and light. The walls were covered with paintings, landscapes, seascapes, portraits, all bearing the same distinctive style. A large easel stood by the window, a half-finished canvas upon it. Paint-spattered rags and brushes lay scattered across a table. Clara moved through the room in wonder, studying the paintings. They revealed a talent she would never have suspected in her stern, reserved husband. More surprising still were the subjects: children playing in Italian piazzas, old women gossiping in Spanish markets, young lovers embracing beneath Parisian lamplights. They vibrated with life and emotion. On a small desk in the corner, she found a journal. She knew she should close it immediately, but her hands seemed to move of their own accord, opening to a page dated 3 years earlier. "The dreams continue," Maxwell had written. Always the same, father's face as he fell, the blood spreading across his waistcoat, her scream from the doorway. "I wake convinced my hands are still stained crimson. Will I never be free of this night?" Clara's heart raced. She turned to another entry, more recent. "She arrives tomorrow. This Clara Fairchild, who will become my wife in name only. I wonder what she expects. A monster, no doubt. The solicitor assures me she is genteel and biddable, qualities that should make her an unobtrusive presence in my life. I require nothing more. Affection is a luxury I forfeited long ago, on the night that changed everything." Clara closed the journal, her cheeks burning with shame. She had invaded Maxwell's privacy, discovered secrets he clearly wished to keep hidden. Yet she could not forget what she had read, nor the paintings that revealed a soul far more complex and sensitive than the cold, distant man who had married her. As she turned to leave, her candle illuminated one more painting, partially covered by a cloth. She pulled the fabric aside and gasped. It was her, or rather, a younger version of herself, perhaps 17 or 18, laughing in a garden she recognized as her family's country estate. The detail was exquisite, from the sunlight catching in her hair to the small scar on her wrist from a childhood accident. How could Maxwell have painted her years before they met? Why would he have done so? And why hide such a beautiful work? A noise from the corridor startled her. Clara quickly replaced the cloth and hurried back through the passage, her mind reeling with questions she dared not ask. Maxwell Sutherland returned on a stormy night 3 weeks later, arriving without warning. Clara was in the music room, playing a melancholy Chopin nocturne, when she sensed a presence in the doorway. She turned to find her husband watching her, his traveling clothes damp from the rain, his face gaunt with exhaustion. "You play beautifully," he said. Clara rose, suddenly self-conscious. "Thank you. I didn't hear you arrive. I came directly from the stables." He stepped into the room, removing his gloves. "I didn't wish to disturb the household so late." "You look tired," she observed. "Would you like some tea, something stronger perhaps?" A flicker of surprise crossed his features, as though her concern was unexpected. "Brandy would be welcome." Clara poured him a generous measure from the decanter on the side table. As she handed him the glass, their fingers brushed, and she felt an inexplicable jolt of awareness. Maxwell seemed to feel it too, his eyes meeting hers with a question she couldn't decipher. "How was your journey?" she asked, retreating to safer ground. "Productive." He took a long sip of brandy. "And your time here?" "I trust everything has been satisfactory." "Yes, quite." Clara hesitated, debating whether to confess her exploration of the hidden studio. Guilt warred with burning curiosity. "I've been familiarizing myself with the house and grounds." Something in her tone must have alerted him. His eyes narrowed slightly. "The entire house." Clara felt her cheeks warm. "I found your studio," she admitted. "Behind the tapestry in the library. I apologize for the intrusion." Maxwell's expression darkened. He set down his glass with deliberate control. "I see. And did you find the contents?" "Illuminating." "I found them beautiful," she answered honestly. "You have remarkable talent." "Talent," he scoffed. "A gentleman's hobby, nothing more." "It is far more than that," Clara insisted. "Those paintings show a depth of emotion, an understanding of humanity that—" "You overstep, madam," he interrupted coldly. "We had an agreement." Clara lifted her chin. "Yes, we did, and I've broken it. For that I apologize. But I cannot pretend I didn't see what I saw." "And what exactly did you see?" The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Clara took a deep breath. "I saw a man who feels deeply, who observes the world with compassion. I saw someone very different from the cold, distant person who married me." Maxwell turned away, his posture rigid. "You romanticize a dangerous habit." "Perhaps," she conceded. "But there is one painting I cannot explain away so easily." He went utterly still. "Which painting?" "The one of me, in my family's garden at Fairchild Manor. I must have been 18. She moved closer to him, compelled by a need to understand. "How is that possible, Maxwell? We had never met." The silence stretched between them, taut with unspoken tension. Finally, he turned to face her. "We had met," he said quietly. "Once, briefly, at a summer garden party at the Wilsons' estate. You wouldn't remember. I was introduced as Mr. Maxwell, a distant connection of the family. Your father was deep in a card game. You were reading beneath an oak tree, apart from the others." Clara frowned, searching her memory. "I don't recall." "You dropped your book. I retrieved it for you, Wuthering Heights. We spoke for perhaps 5 minutes about literature. You were luminous." His voice softened. "I never forgot your face." Clara stared at him, stunned by this revelation. "That was 7 years ago." "Yes, and you remembered me all this time?" "Well enough to paint me from memory." Maxwell's expression closed again. "I have an artist's eye for detail, nothing more." But Clara sensed there was much more to the story, something he was deliberately concealing. "Why did you choose me for this arrangement? Surely there were other suitable candidates with better social standing, even after my father's disgrace." "It was a practical decision," he insisted. "Your lineage is impeccable, despite your father's indiscretions." "My father was a gambler and a libertine who abandoned my mother and me for a French opera singer," Clara said bluntly. "Let us not mince words between us." A ghost of a smile touched Maxwell's lips. "You are remarkably direct for a lady of your breeding." "Poverty has a way of stripping away pretense," she replied. "Now please answer my question truthfully. Why me?" Maxwell studied her for a long moment, as though weighing how much to reveal. Your father owed a considerable sum to my estate. Clara felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. What? He borrowed heavily from my father before his death. When I returned to England and sorted through the estate's affairs, I discovered the debt. And this marriage was your way of collecting. The hurt in her voice was unmistakable. No, Maxwell said sharply. This marriage was my way of ensuring you wouldn't suffer for your father's mistakes. I could have demanded payment and seen you reduced to destitution. Instead, I offered an arrangement that would secure your future. Clara sank onto the piano bench, her mind reeling. So it was pity, then. It was justice, he corrected, and perhaps, he stopped himself, perhaps what? Maxwell shook his head. It doesn't matter. What matters is that our arrangement benefits us both, as agreed. He was retreating behind his walls again. Clara felt a surge of frustration. There is still something you're not telling me. There are many things I'm not telling you, Clara. That was our agreement. He finished his brandy in one swallow. I'm tired from my journey. Good night. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone with more questions than answers and the unsettling feeling that there was far more to Maxwell Sutherland, and to their marriage, than she had ever suspected. In the days following Maxwell's return, Clara noticed subtle changes in his behavior toward her. He joined her for meals, initiated conversations about books and music, and even accompanied her on walks through the gardens when the weather permitted. Though still reserved, he seemed to be making a deliberate effort to establish some form of companionship between them. Clara found herself responding to these overtures despite her initial resolve to maintain emotional distance. There was something compelling about Maxwell's quiet intensity, his flashes of dry wit, and the occasional glimpses of vulnerability that appeared when he thought himself unobserved. One evening after dinner, as they sat in the library with a chess board between them, Maxwell surprised her with an unexpected confession. I have been unfair to you, he said, moving his knight. You deserve more information than I've provided. Clara looked up from contemplating her next move, startled by his words. About what specifically? About why I insist on keeping the East Wing closed to you. He met her gaze steadily. It's not merely my studio that I wish to keep private. She waited, sensing his struggle to continue. My father died in the East Wing drawing room, Maxwell said finally. He was stabbed through the heart with a letter opener from his own desk. Clara drew in a sharp breath. How terrible. Indeed, his fingers tightened around his queen before placing it deliberately on the board. I found him, along with my stepmother, standing over his body. Your stepmother? Clara frowned. I didn't realize. My father remarried when I was 16, a year after my mother's death. Lucinda was 22, beautiful, and, as we later discovered, deeply in debt. Maxwell's voice remained controlled, but Clara could sense the tension beneath his words. The marriage was unhappy from the start. My father soon realized his mistake, but by then it was too late. What happened that night? Clara asked gently. Maxwell's eyes darkened with memory. I had been out riding. When I returned, I heard shouting from the East Wing. I found my father on the floor, bleeding out, and Lucinda standing over him, the bloody letter opener in her hand. Clara covered her mouth in horror. Oh, Maxwell. She claimed I had done it, that she had walked in to find me stabbing my father in a rage over his will, which named her as primary beneficiary. His laugh was bitter. A clever story. There had been witnesses to arguments between my father and me in the weeks before, and Lucinda had always been convincing in her performances. But surely there was evidence of your innocence. Only her word against mine. Maxwell moved another chess piece, though Clara suspected he was no longer focused on the game. The household staff had been given the evening off, her doing, I later realized. There were no witnesses. How did you avoid conviction? The wound pattern suggested a left-handed attacker. I am right-handed. Lucinda is left-handed. And her explanation of why her fingerprints were on the weapon fell apart under scrutiny. He sighed. I was cleared legally, but the scandal was enormous. Many still believed her version of events. So you left England, Clara said softly. I had no choice. My name was ruined. and Lucinda, though not convicted, was equally disgraced. She disappeared shortly after the inquest to the continent, I believe. He looked up, his eyes haunted. The east wing remains exactly as it was that night. I keep it locked because I cannot bear to see it, yet cannot bring myself to change it. Clara reached across the chess-board and placed her hand over his, a gesture of comfort she would never have dared a week ago. "Thank you for telling me." Maxwell stared at their hands, then slowly turned his palm upward to hold hers. "I should have told you before we married. You had a right to know what kind of man, what kind of family, you were joining." "And I should have told you more about my own family," Clara admitted. "My father's gambling was only part of the disgrace. He abandoned my mother and me for his mistress, leaving nothing but debts. My mother died of grief and shame 6 months later." "I know," Maxwell said quietly. "I made it my business to understand your circumstances before proposing our arrangement." Clara withdrew her hand, suddenly uncomfortable with his admission of such thorough investigation. "You seem to know a great deal about me, while I know very little about you." "A fair observation." Maxwell leaned back in his chair. "What would you like to know?" The direct question caught her off guard. Where did you go during those years abroad?" "Italy primarily, Spain for a time, Paris." A faint smile touched his lips. "I studied painting under a moderately famous Italian master who took pity on the disgraced English nobleman." "Your work shows remarkable skill," Clara said sincerely. "Have you ever exhibited?" "Under a pseudonym, Maximilian Blackwood. It provided income when I needed it, before my uncle died, and left me sufficient funds to return to England." "Why hide your talent? You could easily establish yourself as a respected artist." Maxwell's expression closed slightly. "The Sutherland name has been associated with politics and land ownership for generations. Art is considered a frivolous pursuit, unsuited to the head of the family. But surely now, as Lord Sutherland, you can define what that means." "Perhaps," he studied her with newfound interest. "You have a surprisingly modern perspective for someone raised in such a traditional family." Clara shrugged. "Adversity changes one's outlook. After losing everything, I found many social conventions suddenly seemed arbitrary and meaningless." "Indeed." Maxwell rose from his chair, moving to the fireplace. "It's growing late. Shall we continue our game tomorrow?" Clara recognized the dismissal, but found herself reluctant to end their conversation. For the first time, they had spoken honestly, without the carefully maintained barriers between them. "Of course, good night, Maxwell." As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Clara." She turned, "Yes." "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For listening without judgment." His expression held a vulnerability she had never seen before. "It's been a long time since I could speak honestly with anyone." Clara felt something shift between them, a subtle rebalancing of their relationship. "Perhaps we might both benefit from more honesty," she suggested. "Perhaps." His smile was tentative but genuine. "Good night, Clara." That night, as Clara prepared for bed, she found herself thinking of Maxwell not as the mysterious, forbidding husband she had married out of necessity, but as a man wounded by circumstance, yet still capable of kindness and trust. It was a dangerous realization, one that threatened the emotional detachment she had promised herself. Yet as she drifted to sleep, she could not deny that something had awakened within her, something she had long believed impossible. The faintest stirring of affection for the man who was her husband in name only. Spring arrived at Thornfield Hall, bringing with it new growth and subtle changes in the household. Clara had gradually taken on the responsibilities of the lady of the estate, overseeing improvements to the gardens, establishing a small school for the tenants' children, and even hosting occasional modest gatherings of local gentry. Maxwell, to her surprise, supported these initiatives, providing funds without question and occasionally even participating. Their evenings were increasingly spent in companionable conversation, their chess matches becoming a cherished ritual where barriers lowered and confidences were exchanged. Clara found herself looking forward to these hours, to the quiet intimacy of shared thoughts and occasional laughter. She began to recognize the signs of Maxwell's moods, the slight furrow between his brows when troubled, the almost imperceptible softening of his mouth when pleased, the distant look that came over him when memories intruded. One bright May afternoon, Clara was supervising the planting of new roses in the south garden when Phillips approached, looking uncharacteristically disturbed. "My lady, there is a visitor." "A lady who insists on seeing his lordship immediately." "Lord Sutherland is in London until tomorrow," Clara replied. "Did you inform her?" "Yes, my lady. She then demanded to see you instead." Phillips lowered his voice. "She is most insistent, and appears to be familiar with the house." An uneasy feeling settled in Clara's stomach. Did she give her name? "Mrs. Blackwood, my lady." The name struck Clara as significant, though she couldn't immediately place why. "Very well, show her to the blue drawing-room. I shall join her shortly." After quickly changing from her gardening attire into a more suitable afternoon dress, Clara made her way to the drawing-room. Through the partially open door, she could see a woman pacing restlessly, tall, elegantly dressed in the latest Parisian fashion, with striking blonde hair arranged in an elaborate style. Clara entered, and the woman turned sharply. She was beautiful in a cold, calculating way, her blue eyes assessing Clara with unconcealed disdain. "Lady Sutherland, I presume?" Her voice held a hint of a French accent. "Yes, and you are Mrs. Blackwood." The woman's red lips curved in a smile that held no warmth. "For the moment, though once upon a time I was Lady Sutherland as well." Clara felt as though the floor had tilted beneath her feet. "You're Lucinda." "Very good," Lucinda drawled. "Maxwell has mentioned me then. How flattering." Clara maintained her composure with effort. "What brings you to Thornfield Hall, Mrs. Blackwood?" "I was given to understand you had left England." "I did, darling. Life on the continent is so much more accommodating to women of independent spirit." Lucinda moved to the fireplace, running a gloved finger along the mantel as though checking for dust. "But when I heard that dear Maxwell had finally taken a wife, and such a modest little bride, I simply had to return to offer my congratulations." "How considerate," Clara replied, her voice cool. "Though I notice you've chosen a time when Lord Sutherland is away." Lucinda laughed, a brittle sound. "Clever girl. Yes, I thought it best we speak privately first, woman to woman." "About what, precisely?" "About Maxwell, of course." Lucinda seated herself on the settee, arranging her skirts with practiced elegance. "Has he told you everything about our history, about that terrible night?" "He told me enough," Clara said carefully. "Did he tell you that we were lovers before his father married me?" Lucinda asked with calculated casualness. "That he pursued me relentlessly, then flew into a jealous rage when I chose his father instead." Clara kept her expression neutral, though her heart raced. "I don't believe you." "No, ask him about Venice. About the villa on the Grand Canal where we spent 3 passionate weeks." Lucinda's eyes glittered with malice. "Ask him about the promises he made, the plans we formed." "Why are you here?" Clara demanded, her patience wearing thin. "What do you want?" Lucinda rose, moving toward Clara with the grace of a predator. "What every woman wants, my dear, security. Maxwell owes me that much after everything." "You accused him of murder," Clara said incredulously. "You destroyed his reputation, forced him to flee his home." "Details," Lucinda dismissed with a wave of her hand. "Ancient history. What matters now is that I've returned with certain documents that would be of great interest to the authorities. Letters between Maxwell and his father discussing changes to the will, a journal entry expressing his rage." "Forgeries," Clara said firmly, "perhaps. But scandal rarely concerns itself with truth, does it?" Lucinda smiled. "Your own father's disgrace taught you that, I'm sure." Clara felt a chill at the calculated cruelty in the woman's words. "What do you want?" £10,000, Lucinda stated flatly. "A small price for Maxwell's continued freedom and your peaceful marriage." "Blackmail?" Clara's voice was steady despite her churning emotions. "I should call the constable immediately." "You could," Lucinda agreed, "but by the time the matter is settled, if it ever is, Maxwell's name will be dragged through the mud yet again. Is that what you want for your husband? More scandal?" More whispers, perhaps even a trial this time. Clara felt trapped, caught between protecting Maxwell and submitting to this woman's extortion. I need to discuss this with my husband. You have 1 week, Lucinda said, retrieving her parasol. I'm staying at the Griffin Inn in the village. After that, I shall have no choice but to present my evidence to the magistrate. She moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Clara. Don't make the mistake of thinking Maxwell married you for anything but convenience. Men like him don't love women like you. After Lucinda departed, Clara sank into a chair, her mind reeling. Could there be truth to the woman's claims? Had Maxwell and Lucinda truly been lovers? The thought caused an unexpected pang of jealousy that Clara immediately tried to suppress. More urgent was the blackmail threat. Clara knew she should wait for Maxwell's return, but something told her time was of the essence. Making a sudden decision, she rang for Phillips. Have the carriage prepared, she instructed. I need to go to the village immediately. The Griffin Inn was the largest establishment in the small village near Thornfield Hall, catering primarily to travellers on the London road. Clara entered with determined steps, ignoring the curious glances from the innkeeper and patrons. I wish to speak with Mrs. Blackwood, she announced to the innkeeper, who looked startled at the appearance of Lady Sutherland in his modest establishment. Second floor, the blue room, my lady, he replied with a bow. Shall I announce you? No, thank you. I believe I'm expected. Clara ascended the stairs, her resolve strengthening with each step. She would confront Lucinda directly, determine what evidence, real or fabricated, she truly possessed, and then decide how to proceed. She knocked firmly on the door of the blue room. After a moment, it opened to reveal Lucinda, now dressed in a less formal gown, a glass of wine in her hand. Lady Sutherland, she drawled, clearly surprised. I didn't expect you quite so soon. May I come in? Clara asked, her voice leaving no room for refusal. Lucinda stepped aside with a mocking bow. The room was cluttered with trunks and valises, suggesting a hasty unpacking. On a small desk by the window lay scattered papers and what appeared to be a leather-bound journal. I want to see these documents you claim to have, Clara said without preamble. Lucinda raised an eyebrow. Direct, aren't you? Very well, she gestured to the desk. See for yourself. Clara approached the desk, picking up the journal first. It appeared to be several years old, the leather worn at the corners. She opened it and began reading, her heart sinking as she recognized Maxwell's distinctive handwriting. June 15, 1845, Father has refused my request to travel to Italy. Claims it would be inappropriate, given recent events. What he means is that he fears I will embarrass him by pursuing my artistic interests rather than fulfilling my duties as heir. His hypocrisy is unbearable. He speaks of duty while flaunting his young bride before society, making a spectacle of himself. I sometimes wonder if Mother's death was a blessing, sparing her from witnessing his degradation. Clara turned to another page, dated just weeks before the murder. September 3, 1845, confronted Father about the changes to his will. He was unapologetic. Lucinda is my wife, he said, and entitled to her share, as if she hadn't calculated exactly what she stood to gain by marrying a man 3 decades her senior. I will not stand by while she manipulates him into disinheriting me from lands that have been in the Sutherland family for generations. There were several more entries in a similar vein, expressing increasing anger and frustration. The final entry, dated the day of the murder, read simply, "This cannot continue. I must take action." Clara felt ill. The entries seemed genuine, the handwriting, the paper, the ink all consistent with Maxwell's other writings she had seen. Could Lucinda be telling the truth after all? There are also these, Lucinda said, handing Clara a small bundle of letters. Correspondence between Maxwell and his father in the weeks before the murder. Note the increasingly threatening tone. Clara scanned the letters, her confusion growing. They did indeed show a deteriorating relationship, with Maxwell's final letter containing what could be interpreted as a veiled threat. These prove nothing, she said finally, though her voice lacked conviction. Disagreements between father and son are hardly evidence of murder. Perhaps not conclusively, Lucinda agreed, but combined with my testimony and the circumstances of that night. It would certainly be enough to reopen the investigation, especially given Maxwell's flight from England immediately afterward. Clara's mind raced. She needed time to think, to consider her options. "I need to take these with me," she said decisively, "to verify their authenticity." Lucinda laughed. "Do you think me a fool? No, these stay with me until I receive payment." She gathered the papers, returning them to a locked dispatch box. "1 week, Lady Sutherland. Then I go to the magistrate." Clara left the inn in turmoil, her earlier certainty of Maxwell's innocence now clouded with doubt. The journal entries troubled her deeply, not just their content, but their authenticity. If they were forgeries, they were exceptionally well done. As her carriage returned to Thornfield Hall, Clara made her decision. She would not wait for Maxwell's return. She needed answers now, and there was only one place she might find them. The key to the East Wing was kept in Maxwell's desk drawer in the library. Clara had seen him access it once when he thought she wasn't observing. With the household settling in for the evening, she slipped into the library, retrieved the key, and made her way silently to the locked door that separated the main house from the forbidden wing. The key turned with a reluctant creak. Clara paused, listening for any sign that she had been discovered, then pushed the door open and entered, candle held high. The air was stale, thick with dust, and the lingering scent of beeswax polish long since faded. Cobwebs draped the corners of the corridor, and the few pieces of furniture were shrouded in holland covers. Clara moved cautiously, her slippers silent on the carpet runner. She knew from her explorations of the rest of the house approximately where the drawing room should be. Following the corridor, she came to a pair of double doors. Taking a deep breath, she turned the handle. The drawing room was frozen in time, preserved exactly as it must have been on the night of the murder. Furniture arranged for evening conversation, a decanter of what had once been brandy now evaporated to a sticky residue, a book left open on a side table. And there, in the center of a faded Persian carpet, a dark stain that no amount of scrubbing had been able to remove. Clara shuddered, imagining the scene: Lord Sutherland bleeding out on the floor, Lucinda standing over him with the weapon, Maxwell discovering them. Had it truly happened as Maxwell described? Or had Lucinda been telling the truth about their prior relationship, about Maxwell's jealousy and rage? She moved carefully through the room, searching for anything that might confirm or refute either version of events. A writing desk stood in the corner, its surface neat except for a thin film of dust. Clara set down her candle and tried the drawer. To her surprise, it opened easily. Inside was a stack of correspondence, letters from Maxwell's father to various business associates, household accounts, invitations to social events. Nothing remarkable until she reached the bottom of the stack. There, tied with a faded ribbon, was a bundle of letters in a feminine hand. Clara hesitated, then untied the ribbon. They were love letters, passionate and explicit, from Lucinda to Maxwell's father. The dates spanned several months leading up to their marriage. There was no indication of any prior relationship between Lucinda and Maxwell. In fact, several letters mentioned Maxwell with obvious dislike, describing him as "your sullen son" and "that brooding artist who disapproves of our happiness." Clara felt a wave of relief, followed quickly by shame at having doubted Maxwell. These letters directly contradicted Lucinda's claim that she and Maxwell had been lovers before her marriage to his father. As Clara retied the ribbon, preparing to replace the letters, she noticed something else in the drawer, a small leather notebook, different from the journal Lucinda had shown her. She opened it to find not Maxwell's handwriting but his father's, a private diary. The entries were sporadic, mostly concerning business matters, until the last few weeks before his death. Then they took a darker turn. August 28, 1845, "I fear I have made a terrible mistake in Lucinda. Caught her searching my private papers today. When confronted, she claimed to be looking for a missing earring, a transparent lie." September 5, 1845, "Maxwell warns me that L has been making inquiries about my will. The boy may be right. Have instructed Hargreaves to prepare changes, returning the bulk of the estate to Maxwell's control upon my death. Must be cautious until this is done." September 10, 1845, L increasingly agitated. "Suspects something but not certain what. Discovered her with a man in the village yesterday, clearly intimate terms. When confronted, she became hysterical, accused me of spying. Maxwell suggests I send her to the London house until matters are settled. Perhaps he is right. The final entry was dated the day of the murder. September 15, 1845, changes to will complete. Meeting Hargreaves at 7 to sign documents. Have not informed Elle, but she seems suspicious. Gave staff evening off at her suggestion. Now wonder if this was wise. Maxwell riding until dinner. Will speak to him then about securing house valuables. Cannot shake feeling that something is amiss. Clara sat back, stunned by the implications. Lord Sutherland had been planning to change his will to disinherit Lucinda, giving her a clear motive for murder. And he had documented his suspicions of her, creating a record that would have seriously undermined her claim that Maxwell was the murderer. A noise from the corridor startled her. She quickly replaced the diary and letters, closed the drawer, and grabbed her candle. As she turned to leave, she came face to face with Maxwell, standing in the doorway, his expression a mixture of anger and confusion. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. Clara took a deep breath, looking for the truth. "I told you never to enter this wing." His voice was cold with controlled fury. "I know, I'm sorry." Clara met his gaze directly. "Lucinda has returned." The color drained from Maxwell's face. "What?" "She came to Thornfield Hall today while you were away. She's staying at the Griffin Inn in the village." Clara stepped closer to him. "She's blackmailing us, Maxwell. £10,000 in exchange for what she claims is evidence of your guilt." Maxwell's hands clenched at his sides. "What evidence?" "A journal with entries expressing your anger at your father. Letters between you discussing the will, and her testimony." Clara hesitated. "She also claimed that you and she were lovers before her marriage to your father, that your motive was jealousy, not inheritance." A bitter laugh escaped him. "And you believed her? Is that why you're here, searching for confirmation of my guilt?" "No," Clara said firmly. "I came looking for proof of your innocence." The anger in his expression faltered. "My innocence?" "I found your father's diary," she explained, "and letters from Lucinda to him that directly contradict her claims about your relationship. Your father suspected her of nefarious intentions. He was changing his will to protect the estate from her, giving her a clear motive for murder." Maxwell stared at her, processing this information. "You found this tonight?" Clara nodded. "In the desk drawer." "Maxwell, these documents could have exonerated you completely at the inquest. Why didn't you present them?" "Because I never found them," he said quietly. "After my father's death, I was barred from this room while the investigation proceeded. By the time I was allowed to return, many of his papers had been removed, by Lucinda, I assumed. She must not have found these," Clara surmised, "hidden in plain sight in his desk." Maxwell moved to the center of the room, gazing down at the bloodstain on the carpet. "For 10 years I've lived with the shadow of suspicion, fled my home, abandoned my name, lived in exile." His voice was hollow. "And all this time the proof of my innocence was here." Clara approached him cautiously. "I'm so sorry, Maxwell, for doubting you even momentarily, for invading your privacy." He turned to her, his expression softening. "You had every reason to question. We've built our marriage on a foundation of half-truths and necessary omissions." "Not anymore," Clara said firmly. "Lucinda's return changes everything. We need to face this together with complete honesty between us." Maxwell studied her face in the candlelight. "Why did you do this, Clara? Why risk my anger by coming here?" "Because," Clara hesitated, then decided truth was the only path forward. "Because I care for you more than our arrangement should allow. Because I couldn't bear the thought of you facing this threat alone." Something shifted in Maxwell's eyes, a warming, a recognition. "Clara," he said softly, reaching out to touch her cheek. The intimate moment was shattered by a sudden noise from elsewhere in the house, raised voices, the sound of breaking glass. Maxwell immediately tensed, moving protectively in front of Clara. "Stay here," he commanded, striding toward the door. "I will not," Clara retorted, following close behind him. They moved quickly through the corridor, back toward the main house. As they reached the grand staircase, they saw the cause of the commotion. Lucinda stood in the entrance hall, clearly intoxicated, surrounded by several distressed servants. There he is, she cried, pointing up at Maxwell. The murderer himself returned at last, and his little wife too, how charming. Lucinda, Maxwell's voice was ice. You are not welcome in this house. Not welcome, she laughed wildly. I was mistress here once. While you were away, I decided I simply couldn't wait for our business to conclude, so I came to refresh my memory of the scene of the crime. Clara descended the stairs to stand beside Maxwell, their shoulders nearly touching. Mrs. Blackwood was just leaving, she announced to the servants. Phillips, please escort her to her carriage. Lucinda's eyes narrowed. Did you tell her everything, Maxwell, about Venice? About the villa on the Grand Canal? There is nothing to tell, Maxwell replied evenly. We never met before my father introduced us. Liar, Lucinda spat. You've always been a liar, just like when you claimed you didn't kill your father. We have proof of my innocence, Maxwell said quietly. Your letters to my father. His diary documenting his suspicions of you and his intention to change his will. The real motive for murder was yours, Lucinda. The color drained from Lucinda's face. You're bluffing. We're not, Clara said. We found them tonight, hidden in his desk in the East Wing drawing room. Tomorrow we'll take them to the magistrate ourselves. Lucinda's composure cracked entirely. She lunged forward, grabbing a heavy candlestick from a side table and swinging it wildly. I'll destroy you both before I let that happen. Maxwell pushed Clara aside, deflecting the blow with his arm. The candlestick clattered to the floor as Lucinda staggered, off balance. Before she could recover, Phillips and the footman restrained her. Take her to the study and send for the constable, Maxwell ordered. We'll let the law deal with this matter properly this time. As Lucinda was led away, still shouting threats and obscenities, Clara suddenly felt the full weight of the evening's events. Her knees buckled and Maxwell caught her, supporting her with strong arms. Are you hurt? He asked urgently. No, Clara assured him, just overwhelmed. Maxwell lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to the library where he settled her gently in a chair before the fire. He poured her a small glass of brandy, pressing it into her hands. Drink, he instructed. It will help with the shock. Clara sipped the fiery liquid, letting it warm her from within. What happens now? She asked. Maxwell knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. Now we present the evidence to the authorities. Lucinda will face questioning about my father's murder. My name will be cleared at last. I'm glad, Clara said sincerely. You've lived under this cloud for too long. Yes, he hesitated, then continued. But that's not what I meant when I asked what happens now, Clara. I meant between us. Clara's heart quickened. What do you want to happen between us? When I arranged our marriage, Maxwell said slowly, I truly believed I was incapable of love. That part of me had died the night my father was murdered. I wanted a practical arrangement with a woman who would bring respectability to the Sutherland name, nothing more. And now, Clara whispered, now I find myself thinking of you constantly, admiring your courage, your intelligence, your compassion. His voice grew husky with emotion. Tonight, you risked my anger to search for truth. You believed in my innocence when you had every reason to doubt. You stood beside me against Lucinda. I would do it all again, Clara said simply. Maxwell raised her hands to his lips, kissing them reverently. I never expected to feel this way again, to feel anything at all beyond duty and obligation. You've awakened something in me I thought was dead forever. Clara felt tears welling in her eyes. When my father's disgrace left me destitute, I convinced myself that love was a luxury I could never afford. That security was all I could hope for. I entered our marriage believing my heart was safely locked away. And now, Maxwell echoed her earlier question, now I find my heart has betrayed me completely. She smiled through her tears. I love you, Maxwell. Not Lord Sutherland, not my convenient husband, but you, the man who paints with such passion, who plays chess with such concentration, who carries such wounds yet still finds kindness within himself. Maxwell rose, drawing her to her feet and into his embrace. Clara, he murmured against her hair, my Clara, I love you too, with a depth that frightens me. When he kissed her, it was not the formal, perfunctory kiss of their wedding day, but a kiss of genuine passion and tenderness, the seal of a new beginning between them. Later that night, as they lay entwined in what had finally become their shared bed, Clara traced the scar on Maxwell's face with gentle fingers. "What are you thinking?" he asked, capturing her hand and kissing her palm. "I'm thinking about fate," she replied. "How strange that my father's debts to your family led us to each other. How our separate sorrows created the path that brought us together." "Do you believe in fate?" Maxwell asked. Clara considered the question. "I believe that even in our darkest moments, seeds of future happiness may be planted without our knowledge. My father's disgrace led me to you. Your exile made you into the man you are, the man I love. Then perhaps fate has been kinder to us than we knew," Maxwell said, drawing her closer. "Perhaps," Clara agreed, resting her head on his chest, listening to the steady beating of his heart. "Or perhaps we simply found the courage to embrace the love that was always meant to be ours." In the morning, they would face the authorities together, present their evidence, and begin the process of finally clearing Maxwell's name. Society would talk, of course. Scandal was inevitable. But Clara found she no longer feared the judgment of others. She had discovered something far more valuable than society's approval. She had found her true self in loving Maxwell and in being loved by him in return. The mysterious stranger she had married out of necessity had become the love of her life. And in that transformation, Clara had discovered not only his true identity, but her own capacity for courage, forgiveness, and love.